The night my father threw me out of the house, rain flooded the streets beneath the city lights. He stood by the front door, one hand in his pocket, the other pointing outside like I was a stranger. "Leave," he said coldly, "and don't come back." Behind him, my younger brother Daniel smiled with quiet satisfaction. At that moment, I realized something painful. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who share your last name. I picked up my suitcase and walked into the storm without another word. Years earlier, things had been different. My mother was still alive then. She was the kind of woman who made every room feel warmer. She always listened carefully and somehow knew when someone was hurting even behind a smile. She used to tell me, "Kindness is expensive these days. That's why it's priceless." I didn't understand those words until much later. After cancer took her away, our family changed. The laughter disappeared first, then the warmth, then the love. My father buried himself in business. He owned a successful real estate company and everyone respected him. But at home he became cold and distant. Daniel slowly became his favorite. Daniel was ambitious, confident, and talented in business. I was different. I became a teacher. While Daniel attended business meetings in expensive suits, I spent my days helping children learn literature and history. To my father, that made me weak. "Teachers don't change the world," he once told me. "People with money do." After my mother died, things became worse quickly. One evening, my father gathered relatives and executives for dinner. The room was filled with fake smiles and conversations about money. Then he stood and announced, "Daniel will take over the company next year." Everyone applauded. Then he looked at me. As for Ethan, he chose a smaller life for himself. Some people laughed quietly. Humiliation burned inside my chest. That night I packed my bags, not because I wanted to leave, but because I finally understood I no longer belonged there. The apartment I rented afterward was tiny and old. During winter, the heater barely worked. Some nights I survived on instant noodles while doing translation work online just to pay rent. During the day, I taught students. At night, I worked until my eyes hurt. Life was exhausting, but strangely, I felt freer than I ever had in my father's mansion. One afternoon after class, a quiet student named Lily stayed behind. "Mr. Carter?" she asked softly. "Can poor people still be happy?" Her question surprised me. "Yes," I answered after a long pause. "How?" I smiled sadly. "By not letting bitterness change who they are." But honestly, I was speaking to myself. Years passed. Slowly, life improved. The online translation jobs grew into a small agency. International clients began hiring me, and eventually I built a successful business of my own. I worked harder than ever, not for revenge, but for peace. One winter evening, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was my old neighbor. "Ethan, your father collapsed." Old anger rose inside me for a moment. Memories of rejection, loneliness, humiliation. But beneath all of that, he was still my father. At the hospital, Daniel looked completely broken. "The surgery is expensive," he admitted quietly. I soon learned he had made reckless investments and nearly destroyed the company financially. For the first time in his life, Daniel looked afraid. I stared through the hospital window at my unconscious father. A man who once seemed powerful suddenly looked small, fragile, human, and I realized something important. No amount of money can protect people from time or regret. Without another word, I paid for the surgery. Daniel stared at me in shock. "Why would you help him after everything he did?" I looked at him calmly. "Because if pain turns me cruel too, then pain wins." Daniel had no response. For the first time, he looked ashamed. Several days later, my father woke up. When I entered his room, he looked weaker than I had ever seen him. "You paid for the surgery?" he asked quietly. I nodded. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment. "All my life," he whispered. "I thought strength meant power." Then he looked at me with tears in his eyes. But I was wrong. For the first time, He no longer looked like the powerful businessman I feared growing up. He looked like an old man carrying years of regret. "I failed you," he admitted softly. Those words hit harder than I expected. Because for years, that was all I ever wanted to hear. An apology, proof that I mattered. But instead of victory, I only felt sadness. Sad that it took losing everything for him to understand what truly mattered. A month later, my father gathered the family again at the mansion. This time the atmosphere felt quieter, more honest. He stood slowly and said, "I spent most of my life chasing money and lost my family along the way." Nobody spoke. Then he looked directly at me. Ethan became the man I should have been. Even Daniel lowered his head. My father announced he wanted to transfer part of the company into my name. The room filled with shock. But none of that mattered to me anymore. "I'll accept," I said calmly. "Under one condition." Everyone watched silently. "We create a scholarship foundation for children who cannot afford education." My father stared at me for a moment. Then he smiled softly, not like a businessman, but like a man finally understanding life. "Done," he said. Over the years, that foundation helped thousands of children from poor families continue their education. One evening after a charity event, Daniel approached me. "I used to hate you," he admitted quietly. "Why?" "Because Dad respected you in the end," he answered honestly. And deep down, I knew he never truly respected me. For the first time, I realized Daniel had spent his whole life trying to earn love through success, money, and approval. But none of it healed the emptiness inside him. "You don't have to compete anymore," I told him. His eyes filled with tears. Months later, my father and I sat together in the garden during sunset. "She would have been proud of you," he said, speaking about my mother. "I still miss her every day," I replied. "So do I." After a moment, he asked quietly, "How did you forgive me?" I thought carefully before answering. "Because carrying hatred only keeps pain alive." He nodded slowly. "I wish I had learned that earlier. Years ago, I believed success meant proving people wrong. But life taught me something different. Real success is not revenge. It's peace. It's becoming kind in a world that constantly gives you reasons not to be. And sometimes the strongest people are not the ones who destroy others after being hurt, but the ones who choose not to, because kindness leaves a legacy that money never can.